The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that had grown over thousands of years, and light from distant stars filtered through the ceiling like frozen rain. Representatives from 900 species sat in floating chairs arranged in perfect circles, their bodies of every shape and color imaginable. Some breathed gas, some breathed liquid, some did not breathe at all. At the center of the hall stood Counselor Ox of the people. His skin was pale blue and almost see-through, and beneath it, his 3 hearts beat in a rhythm that every species present could recognize as fear. He had traveled 17 star systems to stand here. He had left behind a world on fire. "They have taken 40 of our colony worlds," he said, his voice amplified by ancient technology so that even those without ears could understand. "They have killed millions. They have enslaved millions more. Our fleet is broken. Our armies are scattered. We have nothing left." The council listened in silence. This was not new. The Dominion had been expanding for 300 cycles, swallowing smaller civilizations like a great beast eating whatever crossed its path. The Council had sent warnings. The Council had imposed sanctions. The Council had done nothing that mattered. "We need warriors," Ox continued. "Not peacekeepers, not diplomats. Warriors who will fight and bleed and die beside us. I have searched the records. I have found a species on the outer rim of the galaxy in a small system with a yellow star. They call themselves humans." The reaction was immediate and violent. Elder, whose body was made of living crystal like the walls themselves, rose from her seat so quickly that cracks appeared in her ancient form. The collective mind of the 7,000 individuals sharing one consciousness spoke in unison with a sound like breaking glass. Ambassador Hen of the Floating Kingdoms, a being of pure energy held together by magnetic fields, flickered with something that might have been terror. "You will not speak that name here," Elder said. Her voice was calm, but her body was fracturing. Pieces of crystal fell from her shoulders like snow. "The Council sealed the human file 12,000 cycles ago. It is the only species assessment in our history that carries a universal prohibition." Ox did not understand. He had read what little information was available about humans. They were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 cycles. Their bodies were soft and easily broken. They could not survive in vacuum. They could not survive in extreme heat or cold. They needed to eat and drink and sleep constantly just to stay alive. "They are fragile," he argued. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours. Why would the Council fear them?" "We do not fear them," the collective mind of the responded. "We fear what they become when given a reason to fight." Ox looked around the great hall. 900 species, some of them millions of years old, some of them capable of destroying planets with a thought, and all of them were afraid of creatures who could die from falling down stairs. "Explain this to me," he demanded. "My people are dying. My children are being sold as slaves. You tell me there is a species that might help us, and then you tell me I cannot ask them. Why?" Elder moved closer. The cracks in her crystal body had stopped spreading, but they remained visible like scars. When she spoke, her voice was softer, almost gentle. 12,000 cycles ago, before the current peace, there was a war. A small war by galactic standards. The hegemony attacked a human colony on the edge of their territory. They killed approximately 300 humans, mostly farmers and their families. They expected no response. Humans had no fleet. Humans had no weapons worth mentioning. Humans were, as you said, fragile. She paused. The entire council hall was silent. Within one cycle, the humans had built a fleet, not purchased, not borrowed, built from nothing, using technology they invented specifically for this purpose. Within 3 cycles, they had crossed 200 light-years of space. Within 5 cycles, the hegemony no longer existed. Ox felt his 3 hearts skip. They defeated them. No, they erased them. Every ship, every station, every colony, That had existed for 6 million cycles. The humans ended them in less than 10. And when we asked them why, when we demanded to know why they had committed such destruction, do you know what they said? Ox shook his head. They said, they hurt our people, we made sure they could never hurt anyone again. And then they went home, they asked for nothing, they took nothing. They simply returned to their lives as if they had done nothing more than take out garbage. The collective mind of the spoke again. The council studied humans for 3,000 cycles after that. We analyzed their history, their culture, their biology. We found something that no other species possesses. Humans have a concept they call protective rage. When someone they care about is threatened, their bodies flood with chemicals that make them stronger, faster, and almost completely immune to pain. They become, for a short time, something other than the fragile creatures they normally are. But more than that, Elder continued, they extend this protection to strangers, to species they have never met, to children who are not their own. Show a human a picture of a suffering child, any child from any species, and something changes behind their eyes, something ancient, something dangerous. Ox understood now. He understood why the council was afraid, but he also understood something else. You are telling me, he said slowly, that there exists a species that will fight to the death to protect strangers, that will build weapons from nothing, that will cross the galaxy to defend people they do not know, and you are telling me this is a reason not to ask for their help. We are telling you, Elder said, that once you involve humans in a war, you cannot control what happens next. They do not stop when you want them to stop. They do not negotiate when you want them to negotiate. They do not forgive and they do not forget. They will keep fighting until the threat is eliminated, and their definition of eliminated is not the same as ours. Ox thought of his. He thought of the cities burning. He thought of the children being loaded onto slave ships. He thought of his wife, who had stayed behind to fight even though she knew she could not win. Good, he said. That is exactly what we need. He turned and walked out of the council hall before anyone could stop him. Behind him, Elder watched him go with something that might have been pity and might have been fear. May the stars have mercy on us all, she whispered. He has no idea what he has just done. They had conquered 1,000 species across 10,000 years. They had perfected the art of war the way other civilizations perfected music or mathematics. To them, battle was a formula. You calculated how many soldiers you had. You calculated how many soldiers the enemy had. You compared weapons, supplies, and strategic positions. Then you made your move and the side with better numbers won. It was clean. It was efficient. It was predictable. Subjugator commanded the occupation force on Prime, the largest world in the cluster. He had taken it in 6 hours. The defense fleet had fought bravely, but bravery was not a factor in his calculations. Numbers were factors. Technology was a factor. The willingness to die for a cause was meaningless if you actually died. He stood on the balcony of the governor's palace, watching his troops march through the burning streets below. The civilians huddled in corners, their translucent skin flickering with terror. Some of them had been collected for the slave markets. Others would be used as workers in the mines. The rest would serve as examples of what happened to species that resisted the Dominion. His communication officer approached with a report. Subjugator, we have detected an unknown vessel entering the system. Did not turn from the balcony. Classification. Unknown. The design does not match any species in our database. It is small, approximately the size of a personal transport. One ship made a sound that passed for laughter among the, let it come, perhaps they wish to negotiate. The ship landed on a platform that had been cleared of debris. It was ugly by galactic standards, all sharp angles and exposed machinery, as if someone had built it in a hurry and had not bothered to make it beautiful. The hull was scorched and dented, and there were words painted on the side in a language the translators struggled to process. A ramp lowered, and a single figure walked out. Had seen many species in his time as a conqueror. He had seen beings of pure energy. He had seen creatures that existed in multiple dimensions at once. He had seen living mountains and thinking oceans and swarms of insects that shared a single mind. The human was none of these things. She was small, barely reaching the chest of an average warrior. Her skin was brown and soft-looking, easily torn. Her eyes were dark and set forward in her head like a predator, but there was nothing about her body that suggested she could hunt anything successfully. She wore simple clothes and carried no visible weapons. She looked around at the burning city, at the soldiers, at the prisoners being led away in chains. Her expression did not change. She simply observed, the way a scientist might observe an experiment. Counselor Ox rushed forward to greet her. His skin was pale with exhaustion and fear, and his 3 hearts beat so fast that could hear them from across the platform. "Ambassador Wei," Ox said, "thank you for coming. We are grateful beyond words." The human named Wei did not respond to his greeting. Instead, she asked a question. "How many of our people did they take prisoner?" Ox was confused. "Your people. There are no humans in the cluster. We only made first contact with your species 3 cycles ago." "You asked for our help," Wei said. "That makes your people our people. How many prisoners?" Found himself leaning forward with interest. The human's voice was calm, almost flat. There was no fear in it. There was no anger. There was simply a question that required an answer. "Approximately 2,000 have been taken to the detention center on the northern continent," Ox answered. "But surely your first concern should be establishing a strategic alliance and coordinating our defensive." "We will need their location," Wei interrupted, "and we will need you to stay out of our way." Ox stared at her. "I do not understand. You are one person. You have one ship. They have 40,000 soldiers on this planet alone. How can you possibly—" "I am not alone," Wei said. "I am the first to arrive." Over the next 3 standard cycles, 12 more ships entered the system. They were not warships. Some of them appeared to be cargo haulers. Others looked like mining vessels. One of them was clearly a passenger transport, the kind used for family vacations. None of them were armed with anything that they considered a real weapon. Watched them arrive with growing amusement. He had expected a fleet. He had expected carriers and destroyers and battleships. Instead, he had received a collection of civilian vehicles carrying what his intelligence officers estimated to be approximately 2,000 humans. "They are not soldiers," his tactical officer reported. "Our scans show a mixture of ages and physical conditions. Some of them are elderly. Some of them are barely adults. Many of them have no military training whatsoever." "Then what are they?" asked. "According to intercepted communications, they call themselves volunteers." Considered this word. In the language, there was no direct translation. The closest equivalent meant something like those who act without being commanded, but that concept was considered a mental illness among his people. Why would anyone volunteer to fight a war they cannot win? His tactical officer had no answer. On the surface of Prime, Wei met with the newly arrived humans in the ruins of what had once been a school. The building's walls were collapsed, and the floor was covered with children's drawings that had been trampled during the invasion. One of the drawings showed a family holding hands under a yellow sun. Someone had stepped on it so many times that only the sun was still visible. Wei picked up the drawing and looked at it for a long time. "There are 2,000 prisoners in the Northern Detention Center," she said to the gathered volunteers. "The plan to execute them in 72 hours as a demonstration. They want to show what happens to those who resist." A young man near the front raised his hand. He could not have been more than 20 years old. "How many guards?" 3,000, maybe more. The facility is surrounded by automated defenses. Air support can arrive within minutes. By every military calculation, an assault would be suicide. The young man nodded slowly. "So what time do we leave?" There was no hesitation, no fear, no argument. 2,000 humans in a room full of broken dreams, and not one of them suggested that they should wait for reinforcements or create a better plan or calculate the odds of survival. Wei looked at them, and for the first time since arriving, something changed in her expression. It was small, barely visible, but it was there. Pride. "We leave at dawn," she said. "And one more thing." She held up the drawing of the family. "When we find the children who drew this, we are going to tell them that they do not have to be afraid anymore. We are going to tell them that someone came to help, and we are going to make sure that is true no matter what it costs." The room was silent for a moment. Then the young man from before spoke again. "That is why we came," he said. "That is why we are all here." Far above, in his palace, Subjugator reviewed the intelligence reports one more time. 2,000 untrained civilians against his entire occupation force. By every calculation, this was not a war. This was not even a battle. This was a gift. He had no way of knowing how wrong he was. The assault on the Northern Detention Center began at dawn, exactly as Wei had promised. Subjugator watched the attack from his command center, surrounded by screens showing footage from every angle. He had expected the humans to be clever. He had expected tricks, perhaps, or some form of technology his species had not encountered before. What he had not expected was what actually happened. The humans simply attacked. They came across the open ground toward the detention center with no cover, no vehicles, no air support. The automated defenses opened fire immediately, filling the air with energy beams that could cut through starship armor. The first wave of humans fell. The second wave stepped over their bodies and kept coming. The third wave did the same. "They are not retreating," the tactical officer said, his voice strange. "They should be retreating. Any species would retreat after losses of this magnitude." "Calculate their casualty rate," ordered. 37% and climbing. At this rate, they will be eliminated before reaching the outer wall. Nodded with satisfaction. The mathematics were clear. This was not a battle, this was pest control. But the humans did not stop. A woman in the front line took an energy beam through her shoulder. She spun from the impact, fell to one knee, and then stood up again. She switched her weapon to her other hand and kept firing. A man beside her was hit in the leg. He crawled forward, dragging himself through the dirt, still shooting at the automated turrets. An elderly human, gray-haired and slow, threw himself onto a grenade that had been launched from the wall. His body absorbed the explosion. The humans behind him survived and kept moving. "This is not possible," the tactical officer whispered. "They should be running, they should be surrendering. Why are they not surrendering?" Had no answer. In 10,000 years of conquest, they had never encountered a species that behaved this way. Every civilization eventually broke. Every army eventually ran. It was mathematics. When the cost became too high, rational beings chose survival. The humans were not behaving like rational beings. The first human reached the outer wall. He was bleeding from wounds on his chest and arms. His weapon was empty. He had no tools to climb with and no explosives to breach the barrier. He stood at the base of the wall and looked up at the guards aiming their weapons down at him. Then he started climbing with his bare hands. The guards shot him, he fell. Another human took his place, climbing over his body. She was shot too. A third human climbed over both of them, and a fourth, and a fifth. They built a ladder of their own dead, and they did not stop climbing. Inside the detention center, the prisoners heard the fighting outside. They had been told they were going to die. They had been told that no one was coming to save them. They had accepted this because acceptance was all they had left. Then the wall exploded. Humans poured through the gap like water through a broken dam. They were covered in blood, some of it their own, some of it from the guards they had fought through to get here. Their faces were grim and their movements were mechanical, as if pain and exhaustion had been turned off somewhere deep in their minds. A young human soldier, barely old enough to be called an adult, found a group of children huddled in a corner of their cell. They were shaking with terror, their translucent skin flickering so fast it was almost white. He knelt down in front of them and his face changed. The hardness melted away. The killing machine became something else entirely. "It is okay," he said softly. "We are here now. No one is going to hurt you anymore." One of the children, a small girl with 3 hearts beating visibly through her chest, reached out and touched his face. Her fingers came away wet with blood that was not his own. "Are you a monster?" she asked. The soldier thought about this for a moment. Then he shook his head. "Only when I have to be," he said. "Only to protect people like you." By the time the sun set, the detention center was in human hands. 1,700 prisoners had been freed. The garrison had been eliminated completely. Not captured, not forced to surrender, eliminated. The cost had been high. 412 humans had died in the assault. Another 300 were wounded so badly they could not continue fighting. By any military standard, this was a disaster. By any rational calculation, the humans had lost. But they did not act like they had lost. Wei walked through the ruins of the detention center, stopping to speak with each group of freed prisoners. She thanked them for surviving. She apologized that help had not come sooner. She promised that the humans would not leave until the cluster was free. An elder approached her, his skin gray with age and grief. "You have lost so many of your people," he said. "How can you continue? How can you ask more of your species to die for strangers?" Wei looked at the children being carried to safety by human soldiers. She looked at the families reuniting in the courtyard. She looked at the small girl who had asked if humans were monsters, now sleeping peacefully in the arms of a volunteer who had lost 3 friends in the assault. "You ask why we do this," she said. "You ask how we can accept such losses, but you are asking the wrong question." "What is the right question?" "The right question is, how could we not? Your children were in cages, your families were being sold, your people were dying, and we had the power to help." Wei's voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it that made the elder's 3 hearts beat faster. "In our history, there were times when people with power did nothing while others suffered. We call those times our greatest shames. We swore to never let it happen again. But you are dying for us. You do not know us. You have never met us. Why would you die for strangers?" Wei smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Because if we do not, then what are we? What is the point of being strong if we do not use that strength to protect the weak? What is the point of being alive if we do not make life better for others?" She put her hand on the elder's shoulder. "You are not strangers to us, not anymore. You are our people now, and we protect our people." Far away, in his palace, Subjugator received the news of the detention center's fall. He listened to the casualty reports. He watched the footage of humans climbing a wall made of their own dead. He studied their faces, looking for some sign of madness, some explanation for their behavior. He found nothing. They looked like ordinary beings, fragile, mortal, breakable. And yet they had not broken. For the first time in his long career, Subjugator felt something he did not recognize. It took him several moments to identify it. It was doubt. He sent a message to the Dominion High Command. "Send reinforcements. We have made a mistake." He did not know that the mistake had only just begun. The High Command did not believe the reports from Prime. They read the numbers. They studied the footage. They listened to the desperate messages from Subjugator, and they concluded that he had made an error somewhere. Perhaps the humans had hidden weapons. Perhaps they had received support from another galactic power. Perhaps himself had become incompetent. The mathematics could not be wrong. A species as fragile as humans could not defeat a garrison through sheer force of will. It was not possible. So they sent reinforcements, and they sent something else as well. The chemical weapons arrived on a transport ship marked as medical supplies. They were called Breath of Sorrow in the language, and they had been banned by the Galactic Council for 6,000 cycles. The chemicals attacked the nervous system of carbon-based life forms. They did not kill quickly. They killed slowly, over hours or days, causing pain that could not be measured or described. The High Command had decided to make an example of the humans. General Maya Santos was leading a supply convoy through the Meridian Valley when the attack came. She was 53 years old, a veteran of 3 conflicts on Earth before she had volunteered for this mission. Her hair was gray at the temples, and her hands were steady on the controls of her vehicle even when the sky turned yellow with poison. The gas spread across the valley like a living thing. It seeped through filters. It crawled through gaps in armor. It found every human in the convoy and began its work. General Santos felt it first in her lungs, a burning that spread outward as if someone had poured acid into her chest. Then the pain reached her muscles and she could not move. Then it reached her eyes and the world turned to fire. She heard her soldiers screaming. She heard them calling for help that would not come. She felt herself dying, cell by cell, nerve by nerve. But she did not die. The medics found her 6 hours later, still alive despite injuries that should have killed her 10 times over. Half her face was burned. Her lungs were. Her hands had been damaged so badly she would never hold a weapon again. They carried her to the field hospital, and they told her that 112 humans had died in the attack. They told her that hundreds more were wounded. They told her that there were broadcasting footage of the attack across the cluster, showing other species what happened to those who the Dominion. General Santos listened to all of this. Then she asked for a communication link to Earth. The broadcast reached every human ship in the cluster, every colony in nearby systems, and every news channel on the. It showed General Santos sitting in a hospital bed, half her face covered in bandages, her voice rough from damaged lungs. "My name is General Maya Santos," she said. 6 hours ago, the Dominion used chemical weapons against my people. These weapons are banned by galactic law. They are designed to cause maximum suffering. They are designed to make death last as long as possible. She paused. The camera did not move. "I want to speak directly to the High Command. I want you to understand something about my species. We did not want this war. We came here because innocent people were suffering and we could not stand by and do nothing. We hoped that if we fought hard enough, you would realize that the cost of this war was too high. We hoped you would choose peace." Her voice dropped. The kindness that had been there before was gone. "You have made a different choice. You have chosen to make this war cruel. You have chosen to use weapons that cause suffering for suffering's sake. So now I must tell you something that I hoped I would never have to say." She leaned forward, and even through the bandages, the fire in her eyes was visible. "We spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other. Every weapon you can imagine, we invented first. Every horror you can create, we created worse and used it on ourselves. We carry that knowledge like a scar in our memory. We swore to never use it again. We swore to be better than our ancestors." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "You have just asked us to remember." The broadcast ended. For a moment there was silence across the cluster. Then the ships started coming. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Every transport that could fly, every cargo hauler that could be converted, every civilian vessel with a hull strong enough to survive the journey. They poured out of Earth's system like blood from a wound, and every one of them was packed with volunteers. The Galactic Council watched in horror. "They are not sending an army," Elder said, her crystal body flickering with something that might have been terror. "They are sending everyone who asked to go." The collective mind of the spoke in unison, 7,000 voices blending into one. "We warned we told them what would happen. Now there is nothing we can do." On Prime, Counselor Ox watched the human ships fill the sky like stars falling upward. He had asked for help. He had wanted warriors. He had not understood what that meant. Wei found him standing on the roof of the temporary command center, staring at the lights above. Her face was calm, but there was something different in her eyes now. Something old. Something that had been sleeping. "You are afraid," she said. It was not a question. Ox nodded. "I thought I understood what I was asking for. I thought I was asking for soldiers, for weapons, for strategy." "You were. But this," he gestured at the sky, "this is not war, this is something else." Wei stood beside him and watched the ships descend. Her voice was quiet. "Among my people there is a concept called total war. It means that when a threat is great enough, we do not fight with armies. We fight with everything, every factory, every scientist, every citizen, every breath and every heartbeat and every dream becomes a weapon. We transform our entire civilization into a machine with one purpose: victory. Why would anyone do that? Because we have learned that some enemies cannot be negotiated with. Some enemies cannot be bargained with. Some enemies will not stop until they have destroyed everything we love." She looked at him, and her eyes were dark. "When we encounter such enemies, we do not try to defeat them. We try to make sure they can never threaten anyone again." Ox felt his 3 hearts turn to ice. "That is what you are going to do to the... That is what they asked us to do when they used those weapons." Wei's voice was sad. "We gave them a chance. We showed them mercy. They answered with poison. Now there is only one way this ends." "How?" "With them learning a lesson that no species in this galaxy has ever had to learn before." She turned away from the sky. "We protect our people, and now the entire cluster is our people." The first human assault ships broke through the clouds, their hulls by interstellar travel, their weapons armed and ready. They were followed by troop carriers, medical ships, engineering vessels, supply transports, an entire civilization crossing the stars. Not for conquest, not for resources, not for power. For justice. The High Command finally understood what they had done. They had poked a sleeping giant. They had given it a reason to wake up. And now it was coming for them. The Dominion surrendered on cycle 4847, exactly 18 months after the first human ship had entered the system. They still held half their territory. Their fleet still numbered in the thousands. Their armies were still the largest in the sector. By every military calculation, they could have continued fighting for years. But they did not. The surrender was unconditional. The High Command transmitted their offer to the human fleet without negotiation, without demands, without any attempt to save face. They simply said, "We surrender, please stop." Ambassador Wei accepted the surrender on a platform orbiting Prime, the same world where she had landed alone 18 months before. She was not alone now. Behind her stood representatives from every human ship in the cluster, thousands of volunteers who had crossed the stars to help strangers they had never met. The delegation was led by Subjugator, the same commander who had watched the first human assault with amusement. He did not look amused now. His scales were pale, and his eyes kept darting to the humans around him, searching for threats that existed only in his memory. "Why do you surrender?" Wei asked. "You still have resources, you still have soldiers, you could continue this war." Took a long time to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I have fought many species in my career. I have studied many more. Every species, when pushed hard enough, will eventually stop. They will calculate the cost. They will weigh their losses against their gains. They will choose survival. This is rational. This is logical. This is how intelligent beings behave." He looked at Wei with something that might have been awe and might have been terror. "Your species does not do this. We watched your soldiers climb walls made of their own dead. We watched your wounded crawl toward our positions with their last breath. We watched your elderly sacrifice themselves so that young people they did not know could live. We searched for the breaking point. We searched for the moment when you would stop." His voice dropped to a whisper. "There is no breaking point. You do not stop. And we realized that if we continued this war, you would not stop until there was nothing left of us. Not because you hated us, not because you wanted revenge, but because you had decided to protect and nothing in this galaxy would change that decision. Wei nodded slowly. You are correct. So we surrender. We accept whatever terms you demand. We will pay whatever price you ask, because the alternative is extinction, and even we are not foolish enough to choose that. The peace negotiations took 3 days. The humans demanded only 3 things. First, the return of all prisoners. Every who had been taken, every human who had been captured, every member of every species that had enslaved during their expansion. All of them would go free, immediately and without conditions. Second, reparations. That would help rebuild every world they had destroyed. They would provide resources, labor, and technology until the cluster was restored to what it had been before the invasion. Third, a single phrase added to the Galactic Council's charter. 2 words that would be remembered for 10,000 years. Never again. The Galactic Council accepted the terms. They had no choice. The humans had done what no other species had ever done. They had fought a war without seeking territory, resources, or power. They had fought for an idea. They had fought because it was right. And they had won. 50 years later, a young scholar named received permission to access the sealed human file in the Council archives. He had spent his entire life hearing stories about the humans who had saved his species. He wanted to understand why the Council had feared them so deeply. Elder met him in the archive chamber. Her crystal body was older now, more cracked, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "You want to know why we sealed this file?" she said. It was not a question. "I want to understand," replied. "The humans saved my people. They sacrificed their lives for strangers. Why would the Council consider this dangerous?" Elder was silent for a long moment. Then she gestured to a screen that displayed the contents of the sealed file. "We analyzed their history," she said. "Every species has wars, every species has conflicts, but humans are different. They remember their dead, every name, every face. They build monuments to ensure they never forget. They write songs and tell stories about those who fell. Generation after generation, they pass down these memories like sacred treasures." "That sounds beautiful," said. "We thought so too at first. We thought it was a sign of emotional weakness, a species that could not move past its losses." Its crystal form flickered. "We were wrong." "What did you not understand?" "The remembering is not grief. It is not weakness. It is a warning." Turned to face the young scholar directly. "Humans remember their dead so that every new generation knows exactly what they are capable of when pushed. The monuments are not built to mourn. They are built to remind themselves of what they become when someone hurts the people they love." Felt a chill run through his 3 hearts. What do they become? Something that does not stop, something that does not forgive, something that does not forget. They will spend generations, entire generations, making sure that whatever hurt their people can never do so again. His voice was soft now. The file concluded that humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their strength, not because of their technology, because of their love. Their love. They love so deeply that they will destroy empires to protect a single child. They love so fiercely that they will cross the galaxy to save strangers. They love so completely that death itself will not stop them from fighting for those they care about. Placed a crystalline hand on shoulder. They made the mistake of believing that love was a weakness. They learned too late that it is the opposite. Closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What do we do with this knowledge? How do we live in a galaxy with such a species?" Elder smiled, and for the first time it was not a smile of fear or warning. It was a smile of hope. "We invite them in," she said. "We make them our friends. We earn their love instead of their fury, because a galaxy with humans as protectors is safer than any galaxy that has ever existed before." In the centuries that followed, the Galactic Council expanded the human provisions in their charter, not restrictions, invitations. Whenever a crisis emerged, whenever the weak were threatened, whenever tyrants rose and empires fell, the call went out to Earth. And every time, the humans answered. They came in ships of every size and shape. They came with weapons and medicine and food and hope. They came as soldiers and doctors and teachers and friends. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to help. And when they were asked why, when they were questioned about their motives, they always gave the same answer. Because somewhere out there, someone is suffering, and we will not let them suffer alone. That was the truth that the Galactic Council had finally learned. That was the lesson written in the stars. Humans were dangerous. Humans were terrifying. Humans could destroy civilizations and end empires. But only when they had a reason. Give them a reason to love you instead, and they would fight just as hard to protect you. They would cross the stars. They would sacrifice everything. They would become your family. And that, in the end, was the most human thing of all.